planner with the Central Mass Regional Planning Commission. We've been working with the town of Upton on a housing production plan since this summer. This is part of our community outreach. We're so excited to hear from you all tonight after I give a brief presentation, half an hour, kind of brief.
Emily, is there any way you can turn up the microphone?
Yes, there is. Thank you. How's this? Any better?
Yes.
Okay. Great. So we've been working with the Upton Housing Production Plan Steering Committee. So if you're here tonight, maybe just stand up and introduce yourself.
Steering Committee.
Steering Committee.
So, yes, you want me to introduce everyone, or shall I? So I'm
Sure,
Steve
go
Italian, many people may already know that. I'm Steve Italian from Housing Production Committee.
Laura Hebb from the Housing Production Committee. I don't need a microphone, never have.
Good looking gentleman in the corner there.
Alan Rosenfield, 46 Mechanic Street.
And we have,
I'm roaming around. I'm Kathy Robertson, and I don't need a mic either. And I'm the designee from the planning board.
that's it.
We have a few staff here as well.
Hi, I'm Mike Antonellis, your new town planner. Thanks everybody for coming. Feel free to visit me upstairs in the penthouse anytime to talk. I'm available. Thanks again.
And Joe Layton, I'm the town manager.
I'm Gabe Trevor. I also work at CMRPC as an associate planner. I work on all sorts of stuff, but most of the land use and zoning stuff.
Great. All right, so just a quick overview of what the plan is for tonight. So we just did introductions. I'm going to give a presentation, and then we'll have an opportunity for question and answer. Especially, housing can be quite a complicated topic. So I want to leave plenty of time to answer your questions and make sure that we are clear with our presentation and our intent with the housing production plan. Then we'll take a quick break. There's snacks and drinks. Feel free to get up anytime and grab. There's St. Patrick's Day cookies and chips and such there. And then we'll be breaking out into small groups and doing a interactive mapping activity. So try to get out of here by 8 o'clock. Yeah. So let's just start with what a housing production plan is. Also, if you brought, I printed out the presentation at the beginning at the sign-in table, so feel free if that's easier to follow along, get up and grab a copy of that. I know the screen is a little bit small. So housing production plan is a 5-year plan that must be approved by the state. It helps create a vision for the future of housing in a community by examining local housing need and demand, constraints to development and opportunities for new housing, and has a set of recommendations for the town to pursue. It essentially has 3 components: the comprehensive housing needs assessment, which looks at demographics and housing stock data and projections for the future, analyzes development constraints and limitations, and looks at a community's capacity for growth and plan to mitigate development constraints. It also has a set of affordable housing goals, which is both a numerical goal for housing production as well as an assessment of the types of housing that are needed. And the final component of this plan is a set of implementation strategies, so identifying specific sites which are most appropriate for development, which is what we're kind of digging into tonight with the activity, and identifying appropriate zoning and policy changes. And just to note, this is a process that is updating the plan from the 2012 Housing Production Plan. So how can a housing production plan help Upton? It helps address unmet housing needs, establish a community vision for the future of housing with clear goals and objectives. It'll help the town meet the state's 10% affordable housing goal, which I'm going to dig into in future slides. as well as help prevent unwanted Chapter 40B developments under comprehensive permitting. 40B is something that you may or may not be familiar with. I'm also going to address that and how the town can approach 40B developments in the future in this presentation. And the plan can help influence and identify the type, location, and amount of housing being developed in the future. So, like I mentioned, the town completed a housing production plan in 2012. So I just want to give you a sense of the findings from that plan, just as a basis. The plan identified that the town is in need of increased housing options, and like more of a diversity of housing choices so that there's a greater selection of housing. This included more rental units, a need of more rental units, multifamily housing, and affordable housing for populations like young professionals, seniors, people on fixed incomes, and people in like special needs populations. So in order to address those needs that were identified, the town established 4 goals, which are build local capacity to promote affordable housing, make zoning and planning reforms, partner with developers to produce new affordable housing, and preserve existing housing. So just to give you a sense of this project timeline really quickly, this project kicked off with some data collection in June of 2022. The Housing Production Plan Committee kicked off its first meeting in August of 2022, and we've been meeting regularly, approximately once per month since then. We had a community survey open from October to January, which I hope everyone had a chance to take. We have these survey results available in hard copy form tonight, and Gabe will be going over the results as part of this presentation as well. Today we are hosting the public forum. After this forum, we will be holding stakeholder interviews and drafting goals and strategies to update the existing ones from the 2012 plan. And in the spring, we'll be drafting the full plan, seeking feedback from the community. We also have to get the plan approved by the planning board and the select board before we can submit it to the Department of Housing and Community Development. And then hopefully in June 2023, we submit it to the state and they approve it, or occasionally they have minor feedback for us. So, everyone's favorite topic to dig into, let's start out with Chapter 40B and comprehensive permits. So, one of the reasons for doing a housing production plan is to strategize ways to supply affordable housing. In this context, when we refer to affordable housing, we're using a definition set by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and the state's Department of Housing and Community Development, DHCD. So we're working under metrics that are set by the state government and the federal government, just so that is clear. The definition of affordable housing is, it says that housing is affordable if it's deed restricted to households earning 80% or less of the area median income. So in the next slide, I'm going to dig into this a little bit more, but just letting you know that these calculations are set by the state. So the DHCD states that every municipality in Massachusetts must maintain at least 10% of its housing stock deed restricted as affordable to households earning 80% or less of the area median income. So 10% of every town or city's housing stock has to be affordable. Currently, Upton has not met this 10% threshold, which is part of the reason why we're here today. Because under the law, Chapter 40B, for towns that have not met this threshold, it provides opportunities for developers to bypass local zoning in towns that are under the 10%, if the developers' proposed housing developments include a certain amount of affordable units. So currently, the town of Upton is susceptible to developers coming in and bypassing local zoning, The proposed developments still need to comply with other kind of permits and regulations, but they are able to, for example, if an area is zoned only for single-family housing, they can create a development that has multifamily units. So now I'm going to dig a little bit into the metrics of what affordable actually looks like. So like I said, to be eligible for affordable housing, a household's income cannot exceed 80% of the area median income. So we're not looking at the median income just of Upton. We are looking at the median income of Upton and an area that's essentially set out by HUD. So that's Eastern Worcester County. So in 2023, that number was 135,000, which may be higher or lower than what Upton is in the surrounding communities. There's towns like Berlin and Bolton and Hopedale, a wide variety of communities that are included in this area. So there are also, this metric is broken down by the number of people in a household. So for a single person household, their calculation is that you cannot earn more than $62,600 to qualify for affordable housing. For a two-person household, you cannot earn more than, between the two incomes, $71,550. And this goes on. Any questions on this? I hope this was, yes?
Once a family is engaged in an affordable house and the family size shrinks and they still live in the same house.
That's it.
They 5,000 and it's full.
Yeah. Yeah, the question is if a family moves in and their household shrinks, if they're a three-family and they lose a member of the family, moves out, does this metric change? I believe so. I don't know the exact qualifications. It's probably like a process every year just to double check that you're still making the same income. So that's a good question though. I want to look into that a little bit more. But
Just a question, when you buy a house under 40B, it's still your house, so you don't have to move out if your kid goes off to school.
that's true. Yeah, I was thinking just for rental, but for purchasing,
Yeah.
yes.
You know, and the other thing that's important, I think, to mention, because it impacts seniors, which I think is the concern of a lot of people here, is if you have any assets in town, or you have any assets, like if you sell your house, if you can't afford taxes or anything like that, and you need to downsize, and you're making well under the threshold, if you have to count, you can't, I think you can't exceed $50,000 in savings or in assets. If you sell your house and you want to leave that as a legacy to the kids, you're not eligible for one of these units. And I think that's something that a lot of people get confused about because, so.
Yeah, that's definitely a limit to this law, absolutely. Thank you for your, yeah.
Does preference go to people who already live in Hamilton?
I don't believe so, no. So when they're choosing a, say a unit, an affordable unit opens up, it's part of a lottery process. So I'm not sure what the elements are that go into the lottery process. One of those might be if you live in the town already. I would assume so, but I honestly don't know all of the qualifications that are part of the lottery process.
I do not believe so, I could be wrong, but I do not believe the fact that you live in town gives you an edge over everyone else. I think it's a strict lottery process by the requirements. I could be wrong. But I think that's what it is. Thank you.
Anything else, or can I move forward? So, I just want to talk a little bit about comprehensive permitting and safe harbor, what these terms mean. So, like I said, in towns like Upton, which have less than 10% of their housing stock deed restricted as affordable, the developer can bypass local zoning regulations, building more densely. The proposed development, if the developer decides to making construction under 40B needs to include long-term affordability restrictions with at least 25% of the units set aside as affordable. The comprehensive permit that is granted to these developers to bypass local zoning doesn't waive other permitting requirements like building permits, state highway access permits, wastewater disposal permits, state building code requirements, or state wetlands act requirements. The proposed development would still need to meet all of these. It is just the zoning requirement. However, communities do have power to deny a developer a comprehensive permit by claiming safe harbor if they have an approved housing production plan, which is why we're here tonight. We're working towards getting an approved housing production plan in place. And if the town increases their affordable housing stock by at least 0.5% of the town's existing housing units in 1 year, or by increasing by 1% over the course of 2 years. So if the town, hopefully by June, we will have a housing production plan in place, and the town, if there's a development coming and the town includes 0.5% of the town's existing housing units as affordable, then Upton will be able to deny comprehensive permits moving forward. So the state does bring you some power in denying comprehensive permits. So just to give a sense of where the town is right now and where we're headed in terms of subsidized housing. So right now, the number that we're working off of is a total number of housing units. And this is based on the 2010 census. The state has not updated these numbers to be using the 2020 census, but that'll probably be coming in future months. So you're working off of a total of 2,820 units. So affordable housing calculations are based on this total number. So if you're aiming for 10% affordable housing, this would be a total of 282 units you need to comply with Chapter 40B. Right now, the town has 189 units, so you're about 93 units short. So you've got 6.7%. Doing fairly well compared to a lot of other central Massachusetts communities, but still not quite at the 10%. So like I previously said, the power that the town has to, if you have a housing production plan in place and increase the number of affordable units by 0.5% per year or 1% over the course of 2 years, that would mean 14 affordable units the town would need to add in order to, over the course of a year, in order to deny comprehensive permits. Any questions on that? Yes, go ahead.
Are you using subsidized housing and affordable housing interchangeably?
They are pretty interchangeable, yeah. Because, yeah.
No, answer the question, and then I have a different one.
Oh.
Was it, are you finished?
Actually, I have a more general, what do you throw it out?
Yes, I think you were finished.
My general question is, if the number one strategy 10 years ago was to build local capacity to promote affordable housing, and what is this committee's assessment as to why we're still behind the 8 ball and looking at short-term solutions to try to maintain safe harbor options?
I think that's a good question for people who have maybe lived in the town and know the kind of market history of the town. Have there been affordable units added in the past? I'm actually not sure what the number was in 2012. Maybe you have been adding units gradually to your housing stock.
Well, I guess, Emily, my question was going to be, that was 13 years ago. And I can tell you the town has exploded in growth and cost since 13 years. Yes, we have had some, over 55, various units have had pieces of it, but I think we're going to be shocked if the state turns around in 2 weeks and says, oh, well, now we'll use the 2020 census. All of these numbers are going to be skewed and the numbers on the board are going to be useless.
Yeah. So this is what we're
So
working
by
on.
And I can tell you, you know, I do,
Honest enough.
Well, hold on, can I take a shot at that answer? I'm gonna answer that with supply and demand. So the way to achieve this, I'm gonna give you an example of 149 Main Street. So 149 Main Street is 44 units. I believe it's a third of those units are affordable. Okay, so in essence, they are subsidized in that sense. However, we get credit for all of those units. So we picked up that entire 44 units and counts towards our affordable. That's why the numbers have increased greatly. Michael and Joe, I have been part of the conversation to make sure that we're getting all the units that we actually have credited towards our SHI number. Now, the problem is, as the planning board members can tell you, those are not projects that are typically coming up. So the town has to be the boards, whether it be EOS, planning board, etc. They have to be inviting to some degree, right? The town can't build these properties. We can only steer the process. So if you take a look at, say, for example, Mechanic Street, there was a proposed project there. Well, that project obviously failed. The property was bought under conservation. So how do you answer the question, right? We weren't friendly towards that particular idea, but we were somewhat friendly to 149 Main Street. So I guess we're picking and choosing, but at the same time, I don't think there's a lot of those projects coming to our town. The town seems to be single-family homes, fairly large, and if you look at the last couple of developments that have come, the estates over on Hopkins Road, again, planning board can speak to this. They're seeing these projects come forward, and they're basically for better forward.
but I think also, Steve, one of the big things that Upton needs is rental. Rental contributes to our subsidized or affordable. And I have said for years, Upton has a zoning bylaw that if you have a so-called in-law apartment, it can only be family, you can't rent it. And at this point, with our taxes so high, it makes sense to me to have the homeowner, as they age, move into the quote-unquote in-law and maybe rent their house. And then they could probably afford the taxes, but we don't allow that. It has to be family and it's by special permit. But I think a lot of these issues could be solved if we all work together, like Steve said, with the various boards, to allow things like that. Because as you get older, you don't need the 4 bedrooms. It might be nice to convert your garage into a smaller apartment. You'd be the landlord on site, so you'd have control over what was happening on your property. And that is a huge part of what I think is missing in Upton.
The other thing is, I think, to answer your question, is that between a couple things have happened. I think the latest number of tax bills that have gone out have been over 3,000. So the number of units has also increased, but also from a planning board perspective, we adopted a subdivision rule that, for the senior housing, which is not for regular senior people to get afford, luxury senior housing, that would allow, or anyone else, you can get sort of tweaks or approvals on variances. If, you can get variances to have less frontage, to reduce, to increase density, to add another unit, if you do one of several things. And one of them is to build affordable housing. Another one is to, designate certain, some land for community use. And I forgot what the third one is. But the one people always pick on is to, delegate land for community use, which is usually community preservation. And I think everybody who knows me knows I am a huge supporter of open space and community preservation. But I think what these developers tend to do is they tend to, give the crap land that's not developed and say, here, you have this, and you're going to allow me to build, 5 houses instead of 4. And by the way, the bylaw, the subdivision rules written, we have to do that because that satisfies their obligation. So I think that that's something that can be strengthened. I think that was our intent back then, but I think there are certain drivers. If you want to build in Upton, you have to provide affordables. And I think that's definitely something that can be done as a package.
So I'll just mention real quick, something I've been working on in the very early stages with Mike is the new MBTA zoning act is going to require that Upton have a certain amount of the town zone for multifamily housing at like a fairly high density, which would be 15 units per acre over the whole district that you established. There's a lot of other rules. If anyone wants to talk about it afterwards, it's pretty intricate. But I think that would also, we're in the very early stages of that. But I'll be working with Mike and the planning board on that over the next couple of years, and that's I think that could be an opportunity. You're allowed to have affordability requirements with that zoning if that's what the town wanted to do, but yet you also can't, deny affordable housing in that zoning. So I think that's also like something coming down the pipeline that will probably put Upton in a better position in the long run. I think that law was kind of, I don't know how much it was intended, but I think it'll work out that it kind of complements some of the 40B requirements that towns have been trying to deal with, and kind of have like it's a mandate, so they have a pretty clear pathway to kind of, help their inventory move up.
Great, thank you. I think we're good on this side. So this just kind of continues from the previous slide, showing where the town is at compared to other, the surrounding communities. And that dash bar across is just the 10% mark that is the goal. So pretty similar to a lot of the surrounding communities other than Hopkinton and Westboro, which have exceeded the 10% mark.
How do they do it?
It's a good question.
Yeah, essentially, it's right, condo complexes and or apartment complexes are your kind of quickest way to achieve the objective. But on the other side of the argument, people don't generally accept those depending on the neighborhood, right? Especially in apartment houses, right? It's not necessarily, we'll just say desirable for many people. But I think unfortunately that's, as we move forward, it's going to be a necessity.
Hello, everyone. So, like I said earlier, my name is Gabe Trevor. I work with CMRPC. I do land use and zoning, which is why I'm working on the MBTA zoning. I'm just going to go through some of the population and housing data in Upton, and then I'll talk about some of the survey results. Kind of aligning with those housing numbers a little bit. This is all data from the 2021 American Community Survey 5-year estimate, so that's extrapolating from the 2020 census. There's about 2,700 households in Upton. 11% of those households are a single person living alone. 4% of those households are elderly single-person households. 39% of those households have children under 18. So I think that's a place where affordability really comes in, is with families. Additionally, 19% of residents in Upton, age 65 or over, have some type of disability. Again, that speaks to the importance of having senior-specific housing. The median age in Upton is 44.3 years old, which I believe is older than some of the towns in the area. The median household income is fairly high at $126,000, and 30% of households in Upton earn less than $75,000 annually. And if you look at those affordability numbers, that would put most of those households probably in the affordability bracket with the 80% AMI. So now I'll just go through some of the housing characteristics in Upton. Of those 2,700 total occupied housing units, 89% are owner-occupied, and 11% are renter-occupied. Upton has a 4.8% vacancy rate, which in housing market terms is pretty healthy. You don't want too many vacant houses, because that indicates that there's something wrong. You also don't want no vacancies, so that no one can ever move into town. Again, in line with the owner-occupied number, 86% of the homes in Upton are single-family homes. The median home value is about $500,000. The median sale price of a single-family home in Upton in 2021 was $615,000, and the median sale price of a condo in 2021 was $440,000. So now I'll just walk through some of the community survey results. I don't know how they correspond to the packet that Emily gave out. I'm sure it obviously is accurate, but I don't know if it's in the same order. But this is also obviously available in the presentation. So, part of the survey is we collected the age of the respondents. We didn't have anyone under age 20 respond, so kind of looking at those age cohorts, you actually see that, except for a couple instances, I think the survey results did a pretty good job of aligning with the overall town demographics, especially given only about 350 residents responded to the survey. There are some sort of outlying areas. I think the 30 to 39-year-old demographic is maybe a little overrepresented, and then the 20 to 29-year-old demographic I think is like underrepresented pretty seriously. So take that with a grain of salt, but I do think it reflects overall, Upton is an older community and those older demographics are well represented. 89% of the respondents are homeowners and only 6% of the respondents are renters. So again, if you look at that number from the other slide, compare that to like 11% of units in Upton that are owner occupied, may have been missing some of that population. 50% of respondents have lived in the town for more than 20 years, and 42% live in a 1 or 2 person household. So again, I think that kind of aligns with the age demographics you see in the survey. So part of the survey, we asked residents what type of housing is needed, and then kind of tried to determine who is in need as well. So I think the most desired housing types first, small market rate homes geared towards first-time home buyers, likely be single-family homes. Then small market rate homes geared towards seniors, again, kind of two different cohorts that sometimes have similar needs, where a younger homeowner only really in a place to buy a smaller home, and perhaps a senior wants to, move out of a larger home. They're empty nesters, they want to downsize. They probably have some of the same financial restrictions. Small to medium-sized single-family homes, medium-sized single-family homes, and then one which came up just now, but two which I think are kind of more interesting housing types, cottage housing communities, which we can talk about in more detail when we do the activity, but that's one of the housing types represented in the activity. And then of course accessory dwelling units, which might be a place for improvement. And then according to the survey, the populations that were most in need are first-time homebuyers, seniors, low-income households, families, and young professionals. So these are just some of the questions about sort of why and how people are living in Upton. How important is it for you to remain in Upton as you age? 54% of respondents said extremely important or very important. Then 31% said somewhat important. Only 14% said it wasn't important. Do you plan to live in your current residence as you age into retirement? So 44% of respondents want to live in their residence as they age, and they anticipate they'll be able to afford the home. And 6% of residents do not plan to live in their current home as they age because they will not be able to afford their home and associated costs. And then additionally, if you were to consider moving out of your community, what would drive your decision to move? So I think this is Emily and I were talking, this is a really interesting question. These are, sometimes you kind of expect, people want to move to Florida, they want to, there's some sort of more aesthetic or not superficial, something that the town can't do anything about that is forcing them to move out. I think these are interesting because these are all sort of things that theoretically the town could address, or the town or the state could address with policies. So the first one would be looking for a different home that meets your needs, again, seniors who are downsizing. 2, maintaining your current home will be too expensive. 3, maintaining your current home will be too physically challenging, which I think kind of falls into the same area. 4, looking for an area that has a lower cost of living. You could look at reducing housing costs in the area, and then needing to move into a single-level home, which again I think is a particular concern for seniors. So again, Upton, I think if you just look at the area median income, $126,000, that's fairly high. I think this is an interesting question because, in the housing world, we kind of consider 30%, a third of your income is ideally the maximum that you should be paying for your housing, sort of including all the different costs, not just your mortgage or rent, but like taxes, utilities, and insurance. And almost 50% of respondents, 48%, reported paying more than 30% of their monthly income toward housing costs. And so, what's the term we would use?
Cost burden.
Yeah, so that's what we would consider cost burden in housing policy. 17% of respondents said that affording their home is a challenge. So, maybe those people are paying more than 30%, but they don't really mind. They like their house. They're used to it. But 17% said it's a challenge. And then 15% of respondents would qualify for affordable housing based on the household income and number of people per household. So we were able to use the demographic. We asked about household income. We asked about the number of people in their household. And Emily was able to determine that 15% of the respondents would qualify for affordable housing. I think this is in line with what we saw where 30% of the town is making under $75,000, things of that nature. So just really quickly, some other themes from survey results. And I will say, I don't think these, I think it's maybe a good thing, but these aren't really unique concerns for Upton. And I think these are all things that can really interact with housing policy in interesting ways, especially on the zoning side. There's ways to kind of accommodate these concerns. So one, there was a concern for overdevelopment and traffic. Along with that, preservation of the small town feel of Upton. Basically every community I work in wants to preserve the small town feel. Similarly, a desire for safe, walkable neighborhoods. Who doesn't want that? People want to preserve the open space and the environment, and people are concerned about the rising cost of living, including taxes and energy costs. So I'll hand it off to Emily to finish up.
So this has started to be brought up tonight. What are our options that are out there to address all these concerns related to housing? So moving forward, the town's encouraged to take steps to meet both the 10% affordable housing requirement and provide housing that meets the needs of the town's demographics. The first option that's listed here, the town can choose to work with developers on what is called a friendly 40B option. So the developer would be still working under the threshold of 40B. However, it's less of a hostile situation, and the developer would seek public input and really work actively with the town to create something that the town needs. The town can also encourage housing development types such as cluster developments or modest multifamily units. I'll describe these a little bit more in the following slides. But yeah, these could look like kind of more density, but not necessarily, a 100-unit apartment building. Something that would still fit with the small town feel of this town. But would not be, really taxing on the resources. People have concerns about schools and taxes, things like that. So we'll get into some examples of what that could look like and how the town could achieve those. The third option is to utilize reliable resources of funding. It's no secret that housing requires really reliable sources of money. So luckily, Upton does have the Community Preservation Act passed, and CPA funds are available, which I'll talk about a little bit more in the next slides. Additionally, the town can amend zoning to allow a greater diversity in housing options. All right, so like I mentioned, I just want to talk a little bit about CPA and the options that it has around affordable housing. Money from CPA are both raised locally through a surcharge of the tax levy against real property, as well as annual distributions from a statewide trust fund. So each year, the town has CPA funds to put towards three categories, one of which is affordable housing. The town has a lot of flexibility of housing-related initiatives that it could pursue. There's a list on the next slide, actually. So this is just the beginning of eligible activities for affordable housing that the town could allocate CPA funds towards. Just a few include purchase of land for affordable housing, converting schools, mills, or churches or other buildings into housing, purchasing existing market rate homes, and then converting them into rental or affordable housing units, direct assistance in the form of rental vouchers, down payment and closing cost assistance for first-time home buyers. So yeah, there's a lot of really exciting opportunities that are out there. Okay, so this is what I was touching on a little bit before with the clustered kind of housing design. So in the kind of planning world, we refer to middle housing supply. So it's a term that's used to describe a range of housing types with it's multiple units, but they're compatible in scale with single-family housing style. For example, we've got like fourplexes, duplexes, accessory dwelling units, cottage housing communities, which I'll describe, things that can be designed to look like they're not sticking out like a sore thumb, like the mid-rise buildings, but are a little bit more dense and a better kind of land use than a single-family home on a large lot. Yeah, so they can be more affordable, more sustainable, just better options for the town. Oh, that's I thought I had another slide. So on that note, I'm going to describe what the breakout activity is. So in a little bit, we're going to take a break. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
If some of these units are for sale and someone buys it as an affordable home and they turn around a year later and want to resell it, can they resell it to anyone so it no longer counts as affordable?
I believe so, but they wouldn't be making.
I'm not positive. I believe it's deed restricted at least for so many years. So no, if say someone, so the condos by Valley Tech, when some of those went up, they were still deed restricted and you needed to meet the affordable guidelines. And then what happens is when the realtor lists it, you have to list it according to the lottery guidelines. You don't just, it does go on MLS and it causes a tremendous amount of confusion because sometimes you'll see a condo development and you'll see all of them for 400 and then you'll see this one unit for 200 and you're like, woo, either what's wrong with it or how do I get it? You get it through the lottery. So no, it does remain deed restricted.
Thank you.
But as a realtor, it causes a lot of headaches because people come in and they don't, I get a pre-approval and I'm like, you're not gonna make it.
Yeah, the buyer can get, and I don't know what the amount is, but if you buy a house and live in it, no, not an apartment, but a house, and live in it for 10 years, and there's a couple of these in Upton, and they're built under this program, or they're listed, they're deed restricted. You can sell it for an for more than you bought it for. So you do get a return on your investment, but it goes up with the.
It doesn't go up as fast as market rate.
It doesn't go up.
It goes up 5% each year, at least in Boston.
Yeah.
So you're limited to it. And then in Boston, after whatever they do might identify, 30, 50 years, you can sell it for market rate.
Yeah.
So I assume that would also be incorporated. I just want to say, even as a member of the committee, I think there was one missed potential property that we didn't look at, and I think people should consider it. It's the old church. So the church is 13,000 square feet, at least that's what's identified in the assessor's information, and over 7,000 square feet of theoretical livable space. To me, that would seem to be an appropriate property for disabled or seniors. Why? The senior center is going to be 20 yards away. The library will be there. The country super provides some type of close nourishment for them to buy. And again, I'm thinking that you could easily do, I don't know, maybe 600 to 725 square feet. You should be able to get anywhere, my God, from 11 to 13 units in that building, and it qualifies for the CPA. Just want to say one more thing. I want to compliment Selectman Steve. He's here. He's here because he's the chairman, but he's part of the committee. And personally, honestly, I am disappointed that, let's see, Selectman Bright and Selectman Maureen aren't here as citizens or as town leaders. Joe's job is theoretically the day-to-day. The selectman's office job theoretically is the future. Isn't that what we're here talking about today, the future? So my question is, respectfully, where the heck are the other two selectmen? Not that you can answer that question, but I want to make sure that it gets out. I'm very disappointed in them. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions before I kind of describe the breakout activity, which is going to be the second part of this?
Yeah, I just have a clarification to request. When you gave the percentage number, I think Dave gave this in his presentation, for the number of seniors that under the income guidelines would be eligible for, they would fall under the amount that, they would be eligible for this housing, except if they have assets worth over $50,000 a year. So it's not if you all of a sudden, if you're on retirement, you have a small pension, and you have Social Security, so you're bringing in $40,000 or $50,000 a year. Yes, if it was just, you would be eligible. But if you just sold your house for $600,000, you would not be eligible.
Right.
And just for, just clarification purposes, in my mind, subsidized housing is housing that receives a state subsidy.
Yes.
And affordable housing is deed-restricted housing. So it's not necessarily, because if you go into affordable housing unit, you're not getting any income support from the state other than the requirement that it stay deed-restricted. So I would like, for discussion purposes, that those two terms stay separate, that affordable is affordable, that subsidized is subsidized, rather than used interchangeably.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that
David has a question.
Can I comment on the survey results? I think most people here, though, have heard my rant that Upton has an aging problem, because in the 2010 census, 19.6% of us were over the age of 65.
Can you use the mic?
Okay. Many people here already heard me say this, but Upton has an aging problem. 19.6% in the 2010 census were over 65, easily outstripping the other towns around us, like Grafton was 13.3% over the age of 65. Since 2010, we are part of the problem. We have started adding about 350 age-restricted 55 plus units. It's only going to make that balance even more lopsided. So my concern was a lot of elderly people, great for the tax rate because we don't put kids in school, but we should be saving that money, I think. But not contributing much to the town, to be frank. Most of the people at Rockwood Meadows, some people at Rockwood Meadows don't know where the town hall is, they told me that. A few of us, a few of us in Rockwood Meadows, and I think it's also from Upton Ridge, do take an active part in the town, but a lot don't. So that's an issue for the town's future, for its vitality. We've got to get 350 more units, but we don't need more old people, we need more young people to provide the energy, the vitality, the youth leaders, the small businesses, and so on. So part of my rant was, when the committee formed, we have to start encouraging and finding a way to bring these families into town. So my comment is, I'm very gratified to see how much the bulk of the commentary from the survey says much the same thing. I guess people didn't hear me, but people still think the same as I do. Thank you.
David, and I would say, right, it gets back really to that supply and demand, right? Because we have an over 55 development that's been developed up at Shining Rock, and of course, Cobbler's Creek, which is over on Westboro Road, North Street, that's an over 55 as well.
Those are for over 55 who can afford it, not folks that want to downsize their house and move into a smaller space because they can't afford to spend $700,000 or $800,000
I think the point they're saying is that we're overbuilding 50,
definitely.
overbuilding 55.
It's what they're doing at Governor's Landing too.
And to the detriment of young families who need that vitality in town. We need young families in town.
There's no
And the point I was trying to make is really about the age situation, right? And as you mentioned, they're not affordable. They're quite valuable, quite expensive to own. However, we have more coming online. So as you mentioned with the age issue,
We
you know,
did not
that-
realise when we bought our house here that would be followed by 3 others developments. We just assumed it was a one-off, which was stupid maybe, but we did.
No, but I think with Governor's Landing, we have a chance of getting them to designate some of them affordable still, is that right?
I'm sorry,
At
could you?
Governor's Landing, 100 units, we have the chance to designate some of them as affordable still.
Joe, is Governor's Landing mostly age restricted now, or is it?
Most of it, yeah. There's some market rate townhouses in the front, but the bulk of it is
Hundreds
age.
to 55 and over.
Yeah, so I mean.
So that's where I get the 350 for rounding up those 4 developments.
Yeah.
That's not the point. The point is we need young people, and I'm glad to see a lot of surveyors want to
Yeah.
agree.
Actually, if I recall, it was a presentation that was given to the Board of Selectmen probably, I would say it's got to be 14, 16 months ago, regarding Governor's Landing. And at that point in time, they have shuffled the deck a little bit as far as what they're trying to achieve there. But at that point in time, I want to say it was something like 148 townhouses and then maybe another 50 or 60 single-family homes, of which they were only proposing, I want to say it was 9 units of affordable off property.
I thought it was 8.
Which, the moral of the story is it's a ridiculous request. Which to me, it was, you know, this is ridiculous, don't even bring this before us. This is, you're not solving any of our issues here. You're asking for us to make concessions, yet you're not checking the box for affordable housing, you're not bringing any commercial industrial development onto 140, you weren't achieving any of those things. So why would you ask for 9 off-unit affordables? But these are the problems that we run into when trying to steer these projects, is unfortunately,
Well,
it's
to
not
make it
easy.
worse, then they reduced the amount that they would have been in their obligation if they requested variance for the specific stated purposes. They didn't want to provide any affordables. So they put it under 100, I think, or exactly 100, because anything above would have triggered affordables. You have a question?
Well, talking about all this is really fine, but we're not talking about the impact to the citizens of the town and what's going to happen. For instance, what's going to happen to fire and police and schools? Do we have the school capacity to support bringing in a lot of people with families? If we're paying for that building over there, the community center, which is a real burden. You've got your tax bills. So it's sort of like, what are we going to do about schools? We brought in kids from other communities to fill the seats that were available, and now we can't use those seats. So if we're full and we start building multi-family units, trying to attract people with their families, what are we doing to the taxpayers in this town trying to survive? I'm looking weird, because what I see happening is taxes here are going to get to the point where it's not going to be worth it for me to stay.
Well, to be fair, out of all these, I did hear that just Rockwood Meadows alone reduced the tax rate. I did hear that Rockwood Meadows alone, when it was built out, reduced, I did hear, may not be true, but I did hear that Rockwood Meadows alone, 58 units, when it was built out, reduced the tax rate. We should have saved that money for the schools. I want to get across my point, which was not, we need, I'm making this demographic point not so that we can meet these goals specifically. I'm making a point because the town needs the youth to counterbalance all of the aging and aged population it's attracting. And having affordable housing goals met is a nice byproduct, but personally, that's not why I want to see this balance redressed.
I think too, when you talk about like a duplex or these small cluster houses, you would bring in possibly young singles. There's an awful lot of people that grow up in this town that cannot afford to stay in it.
I agree.
So it's not all families. They're not all coming in with multiple kids.
No, that
it's
was-
a place to get your foot in the door.
Exactly.
And some of these denser housings may be what we need, because right now, you can't get your foot in the door. Right now, there are 4 properties for sale in Upton. One of them is Rice's Old Chiropractic, at the intersection, that's $525,000. Everything else is just under $1 million.
Well, my
And that's ridiculous.
No,
How do you graduate from college with tremendous debt and then pay $1 million for a house? You don't.
Well, I'm agreeing to what you
Right.
say, but when you say you want to bring in families with kids, I'm worried about, we have to look at the big picture of what we're doing.
But they're going to pay taxes too. They're not going to come in and not pay any taxes. They're going to pay taxes as well. And they're going to make sure this town survives, because it won't survive if we're all over 65. The town will die.
The towns that have predominantly over 55 projects are all in fiscal trouble because there's no leadership. They won't vote for the schools, so people won't, and you're right, the towns do die. So we need to be very careful about pushing these over 55 versus saying, I know you're not saying no families, but I don't think, with the average age of the kids, God love me, I was 37 when I had my first. And that's more what's happening. So we want a younger, vibrant group. And I think if we get smaller cluster housing, I think that's what we'll bring in.
And I firmly agree with that.
Right.
I don't know if this is a stupid question, but if we bring in, if we drop the rates by, we have affordable, and younger families are coming, don't we qualify them for some more state funding for those children as I guess the amount of earnings of the town is spaced out more? Does that make sense?
So it's the average income
The
drop.
average income drops to some degree. Don't we qualify for more state aid for a percentage?
From what, you can probably answer that.
No, yes.
I think how it comes into the conversation is that we receive very little state aid compared to a lot of surrounding towns, because on the whole, the demographics that you saw earlier as far as average household income is the main indicator that, while we may not feel it from the state's eyes, we are a rich community, and that's reflected in the comparatively little state aid we get to fund our schools. So yes, if we had housing options that had a broader range of income earners, some of which may be starting out. When we talk about affordable, we're also talking about where many of us, unfortunately now counting decades back, but just starting out as professionals where there aren't those options within town. We point to 149 Main Street, that's 49 units, but if we were to count up the amount of kids that come out of there, it's like 1 or 2.
Right.
That's housing options that the town needs. The families are going to find those homes in town. It may take a while, it may cost a lot, but we're hitting Upton is a desirable community from an educational standpoint. So those people are coming here. It's the people that want to start out, that they graduated, they left, they can't come back. Those are some of the people that you want to be able to keep here. And it's about developing those strategies, because if we just stay with market housing, that's what's escalating the cost for services. The variety or lack of variety sort of is something we need to offset this.
The other thing, just this maybe I had to run out to get a phone call, but that may also, this isn't exactly an option because it may have already been said, if it has, I'm sorry, and shut me up. But the state has that MBTA community, which was an option until it wasn't. And there was just a letter from the Attorney General saying, this isn't a choice, you're going to have to comply. So we're going to have to do that. And then there's also 40B, which we were, a developer came in, wanted to build a very big apartment complex. There's a couple other 40B coming in that don't fit in to, they weren't friendly ones, that don't fit in to the neighborhoods. That there's one at the, I think, corner of James Road and Westboro Road, which is going to be 6 units, 6 houses, packed into a small lot. You know, so it's either, if we don't reach the goal, it's either, you know, which we might be able to do under the MBTA, we're gonna get 40B slapped on us. So it would be great if, you know, the way that it used to be is we controlled our own zoning, we controlled our own, we don't. The state is like, this price is, you know, you gotta provide. So,
You know, and Marcia, Joe brought up a great point, and I asked the question, actually, it was last year at the school budget, when they certified the budget for the school budget, I had asked the question, which is, you know, how many students, can somebody look into it for me, how many students have we increased from 149 Main Street? Because again, you would just assume X number of units, you know, X number of, you know, children per family. You figure that, you know, you'd have a substantial increase, and it was surprisingly low. Again, it was 2 or 3 students, as Joe mentioned. So it doesn't always mean that if you have an apartment house, that you're automatically going to pick up, you know, 2 students per unit. And say, oh boy, there's 100 units, there's 200 new students in the school district. That's not always true. It may be, but it's not always. But I missed the first part of your question, which you asked earlier. But I think we've kind of beat it up a little bit. And the fact that the non-friendly 40Bs are very dicey, because I live on South Street. It's very rural, and no sidewalks, we don't have town water, we don't have town sewer, any of that. But if the worst situation, let's just say hypothetically one of my neighbors, for some reason, the house were to fall into disarray or whatnot, a non-friendly 40B means that somebody can come in and build multiple family units on that parcel of land, which is normally, obviously, Upton zoning is, we have 2-acre builders, 2-acre lot, 200 feet frontage.
height restrictions, abutting, you know, you can't
Yeah,
right
your
against
setbacks
the next
are all
door
set,
neighbor.
right? So
All that goes away.
all that goes out the window.
Yeah, my point was, there's a lot of things to consider when we're making comments of, this is what we need. And the thing is, we gotta look at these other things and what suits the town best.
And the reality is, we may not be able to achieve it. What we come up with and what we think is a good idea, we may not be able to achieve. We're gonna try, but if it's...
Exactly, we should look at it and try.
Yeah. Alan mentioned property with the Board of Selectmen control across the street. I believe it's the Affordable Housing Committee in town also controls a piece of property on Hartford Avenue. And that was supposed to be an affordable project over there, so that's something that sooner or later we're gonna get around to that topic, see what we can do with that. Hopefully with Michael on board, that's something that you know, we'll take the forefront and figure out where do we stand with that project, because that promised, you know, for maybe 4 or 6 units over on that piece of property. So again, whether it's achievable or not, we don't quite know that.
It seems to me that the 2-acre zoning is really a problem, because that's going to be a $200,000 piece of land, pretty much anywhere. So the house that gets built on it is going to cost $300,000, $400,000. The builder has to make a profit, has soft costs. So it's a $700,000, $800,000 house.
Right.
So if we can build more houses on this, and I totally reject this idea of preserving the small town feel by having 2-acre zoning, because I don't think that property on Hopkinton Road, those things have any character whatsoever. So if you go to towns like Newton, which is an old established house in Brookline, on 5th of an acre lots, they have a lot of character. So
Well, Upton has variable lot size requirements. It depends on what zoning district you're in. So if you're downtown, you don't need 2-acre zoning. If you're on Lower Mechanic Street, you don't, I think it's 1-acre zoning. You don't, the 2-acre zoning is not uniform across town. It tends to be in the more agriculturally zoned areas. I don't know I'm on the planning board, not the zoning board, so I don't know what the different zones are.
I would say all of your outlying roads are basically, you know, you're building 2 acres,
Yeah.
but it does vary. Subdivisions are different, of course, and a lot more than 1 acre.
I know.
But yeah, your point is well taken. That's,
And I know-
an issue, and that's,
My mother was involved with some of the zoning, and the 2 acres were set because they wanted to keep Upton rural. And unfortunately, what happened is Upton and became exclusive. Because of the large lots. And you're right, you know, as the costs increased, but that was the goal when they first implemented the zoning, was to keep the town rural. And we did that until Hopkinton filled up and Westboro filled up, and as people filtered from the east, the prices went through the roof. And Kathy and I were talking this morning, we all grew up in poverty, but we didn't know it because there was just different degrees of poverty. Nobody knew where Upton was.
We used to be one of the Blackstone Valley, we were part of, was one of the poorest sections. It was the poorest section of the state. And Upton schools were on double sections. I went to school in a trailer.
Yeah.
You know, at Nipmuc. I mean, it was different then, you know, but anyways, that's not where we are today.
Yeah.
It's just I moved back to Upton, I think about 3 years ago. And the only reason I could move back was my parents had a farm in Upton, and they gave me 2 acres of land to build. Because otherwise, and I've been a professional all my life. I've been in the workforce since I was 17. I never would have been able to move into this town. You know, so and now my struggles recover. I understand. You know, so I share your pain. You know.
Well, it's just a matter of there's more things to consider than what do we think is a good thing to do.
Yeah.
There's things to cost to the people.
Great, do we want to get into the breakout activity? We can definitely continue these discussions through the activity, but I'm going to briefly describe what kind of the intent of this is. So breakout into groups, I think we probably have like 3 groups, I would say. So each table has a large map of the town, and myself and the committee have put these red circles in areas that we are calling study areas. So based on past plans and conversations that we've had, these are areas that we've identified could maybe in the future have housing built somewhere in the area. We wanted to keep it general, not target anyone. No one's like, hey, that's my house. The idea of this is to consider what types of housing you would be comfortable seeing built here if possible in the future. There aren't currently, as far as I know, like any plans, at least based off the housing production plan, to build housing in this area. But if a developer were to come to the town and with a proposal, what types of housing would you see? Would like to see? So I just want to briefly describe the types of housing that are in these little kind of, I'll call them stickers, but they don't stick. But you can ideally assign 1 or 2 of each of these housing types to each of the 6 study areas. So I'll go through, we've got accessory dwelling units, which are small, independent residential units located on the same lot as a single family home. They're also called like granny pods. They've got one name. We've also got the cottage housing community, which I had mentioned before. So this is a group of small, single-family dwelling units, but they're generally around 800 to 1,200 square feet. They're clustered around a common area, so maybe a community garden or a path. They have connected backyards and a really pedestrian-friendly environment. It's not focused on like the parking or anything. It's really got like a community feel, but people have their own individual homes. Next option is a tiny house community, so kind of similar, but these dwellings are under 600 feet in floor area, and they're clustered around a common area. And we have small scale apartments, so these are small to medium-sized structures with between 2 and 6 rental units arranged either side by side or stacked. We have small-scale condominiums, which is a group of detached or attached structures divided into several units. Each are separately owned, surrounded by common areas, which are jointly owned and maintained, usually by a condo association. The next one with the pool, we have a large-scale apartments or condos, so rental or ownership, which can be one large structure or a group of medium-sized structures divided into numerous units. usually have surrounded common areas like a pool or a gym or a lawn, something like that. Next we have mixed-use residential commercial, so that's a small to medium-sized attached or detached structure, which typically has commercial use on the first floor, like businesses or offices, while residential units are stacked above it. The next one is a senior housing or assisted living facility. This can look a bunch of different ways. I tried to find a picture of something that I could kind of envision in Upton, at least the region. So this is a housing facility for older adults with disabilities or those who cannot live independently. It could be individual rooms or apartments or shared quarters. The next one is a duplex or 2 units. So it's technically a multifamily home, but it does look very similar to a single family home. And yeah, floor plans can vary. They can be stacked or side-by-side units. Then we have townhouses, which are small to medium size detached structure. That's between 2 and 16 units, placed side by side. All right, so those are the housing options. So I just want you to consider each of them and where in town, based on these study areas, you could potentially feel comfortable seeing this built in the future. There's sticky notes available if you want to make any notes about why or why you hate this type of housing, you never want to see it built in Upton. Really turn this into a work of art. I'll be going around. Let me know if you have any questions.
So we can look at other areas that I serve.
Yeah, so these were areas we just started as a basis, but if you know of any areas in town that maybe is privately owned and could be sold, feel free to mark that and circle it. Which areas they like, which houses, styles they like, just a quick debrief.
So what we're going to do now is the committee's going to put all of this together and try
I
to
think
come
from our
up with
perspective,
something.
anywhere you could fit cluster housing would be good. I'm sure there are a lot of areas where you can have cluster housing.
No, I didn't. I feel so.
Good work. My business cards, but making sure
Oh, I thought you all If you want, like Marshall.
No, but you understand what your proposal is.
So it's my understanding I've been asked to give a summary of what we did. So when we took our map, we looked at the town-owned lands out on the Westboro Road, and we thought cottage house communities, small-scale condominiums, and duplexes might work on those 10 acres out there. Right downtown, there is conservation land, and Joe has said in order to develop conservation land, we would have to swap it out. But the 35 acres behind Coach Road, we were thinking it might be, if it was possible, to swap it out for other conservation land. Put something else in conservation, the mixed-use residential commercial would work well there. And then, we talked about small-scale apartments, and we talked about the fact that Kevin Meehan has bought the post office, the old registry, and back there. And maybe we could entice someone like him to put the small-scale apartments, would be consistent with the neighborhood. It's in the center of town, because as we develop, and we kind of tie our thoughts into the MBTA community, because we're going to have to build denser, we're going to have to do overlays. So we thought those areas there might work. And then we thought up at Governor's Landing, in that area, perhaps some townhouses. The same theory, build denser where they're accessible. That was our thought. We figured we solved the problem.
Just 1 hour time.
Yes, exactly. In 30 minutes.
Different style houses being built. I personally, but I'm in a minority, are not interested in the area up in North Street leading to Westboro, because it's the same problem as I think some of the other developments have. Too close to a larger town for people to feel any sense of continuity into our town. But the group generally approves the cottage house style, the duplex style, the mixed-use residential commercial style, and as Natalia said, we should focus on town-owned land, because that's probably going to be the easiest for us to convert to the housing that we need. I'm enthusiastic, though, despite what I just said, about the property right on the Hopedale line on 40, because there's a lot of open space, and the garden centre recently closed, sold up. There's a developer who might be interested in building townhouses and small-scale apartments there. Like everybody else, the area around the Governor's Landing along Route 40, which is currently commercial zoned, would be great to put another commercial area there. So we've got some residential commercial on top of there, and also condos and townhouses that seem to feel they fit getting towards the town, getting towards the community centre. The denser housing, more people being born into towns, partly by the community centre. Also, I was not part of this, but there appear to be some small-scale condos on the town-owned land in the general off Linden Street. So beyond the Catholic Church, there's a swathe of land that would easily be developed, and again, is reasonably close to the town centre where we could put some condos.